Public discourse is saturated with the threat of kinetic exchange. Hypersonic glide vehicles. Launch-on warning protocols. This is a calculated diversion. The fixation on the missile is a critical error in threat assessment. The primary vector for asymmetric escalation is not a warhead. It is strategic silence. The objective is not to destroy U.S. assets but to disconnect them. According to CSIS, the true zero-day exploit targets the central nervous system of American power. This involves two simultaneous actions: severing the subsea data cables that carry the global financial system, and orbital blinding of the satellites that govern GPS, military command, and control. It is the lowest kinetic cost for the highest systemic impact. This is the protocol to engineer a specific state, the blind Leviathan. A hegemon with unparalleled military force rendered inert, a fleet without navigation, an economy without transaction data, a command structure without communication. It is paralysis as a weapon, designed to trigger a solvency crisis before a single shot is fired. Conventional warfare is a mathematical liability. Analysts at CSIS confirm that for a state like Russia, a prolonged, symmetric military campaign is not a projection of strength, but a solvency crisis in motion. The immense kinetic cost and political risk of an unpopular war create an untenable domestic liability, threatening the regime's own survival. When a state's balance sheet cannot sustain direct conflict, its strategic protocol must pivot. This is not a choice. It is a mathematical function of weakness. The core objective shifts from kinetic victory to fiscal attrition. The adversary is forced to abandon the chessboard of conventional power and weaponize the opponent's own systemic vulnerabilities. The resulting strategy is asymmetry. It is a launch-on warning protocol for a nation facing insolvency. Unable to afford a symmetric fight, the adversary exports its crisis. It becomes the architect of the strategic simultaneity conundrum, a principle validated in academic crisis simulations. Source: Political Science Now. Each engineered flashpoint is a low-cost probe designed to trigger a high-cost U.S. response. The adversary's weakness, its inability to afford a real war, is weaponized to exploit America's primary fragility, its systemic debt liability, a figure now exceeding $38 trillion. Source: Fortune. The goal is to force the hegemon to bankrupt itself policing manufactured fires, precipitating a financial cascade that achieves what no tank division ever could. This is war by spreadsheet. The entire kinetic cost structure of the 21st century has been inverted. The Royal United Services Institute, or RUSI, lays out the mathematical certainty. A legacy asset, the main battle tank, represents a capital liability of approximately $5 million. The asymmetric counter, a commercial FPV drone, is a $500 disposable asset. This 10,000 to 1 cost-exchange ratio is the engine of what strategists at CSIS call the democratization of violence. The ability to project lethal standoff force is no longer the exclusive domain of superpowers with massive industrial bases. It is now a commodity, accessible to any non-state actor or mid-tier power with a startup's budget. This is the core exploit against American solvency, the mechanism that triggers the strategic simultaneity conundrum. Adversaries do not need to match a carrier group. They need only initiate multiple low-cost fires. Each one demands a high-cost American response, forcing a drawdown on a U.S. Treasury already facing a systemic liability crisis. The objective is not military parity. It is to force a national solvency event by weaponizing America's own balance sheet. The battlefield is not a physical location. It is a distributed network of financial and political stress tests. These are the gray zones, proxy laboratories where adversaries calculate the exact kinetic cost required to trigger a U.S. solvency crisis. Analysts at CSIS confirm this is not random chaos. It is the deliberate weaponization of the strategic simultaneity conundrum, a blueprint validated in political science simulations. Each engineered regional crisis functions as a single node in this asymmetric network. Flashpoints in the energy sector, from Venezuela's oil fields to Iranian maritime lanes, are not the primary objective. They are low-cost staging grounds. Per reports from RUSI, these zones are designed to force U.S. overextension, compelling a fiscal bleed-out to defend the petrodollar system long before a single direct kinetic exchange occurs. The goal is to maximize America's financial liability for a minimal investment. Domestic instability in allied or peripheral nations, therefore, is not the cause of this conflict. It is a symptom. It is a diagnostic tool. Adversaries observe these proxy flare-ups to measure the decay rate of Western institutional resolve and, crucially, to test de-dollarization protocols in a live environment. They are calibrating their strategy against the ultimate vulnerability, the $38 trillion U.S. national debt. The math is the weapon. National insolvency is the kill switch. The ultimate protocol is not a political debate. It is a time-to-target calculation executed by a system under extreme duress. Analysts at CSIS define the launch-on-warning doctrine as a retaliatory posture. When strategic early warning systems, satellites and ground-based radar, detect and verify an inbound adversary missile launch, a retaliatory strike is initiated before the incoming warheads detonate. The protocol's logic is brutal. It guarantees a second strike capability by launching before your own command and control infrastructure is vaporized. It removes hesitation. It is built for a world of analog certainty. Now, introduce the asymmetric vector, a targeted cyber attack. Adversaries do not need to fire a missile. They only need to create the digital ghost of one. This is the fog of digital war. A nation-state actor or a proxy can spoof radar signals or, more effectively, blind the system entirely. The screens go black. The commander now faces a mathematical certainty of ruin. Is this a system failure, or is it the prelude to a decapitation strike? In the context of a systemic solvency crisis, where the nation cannot afford a prolonged kinetic conflict, waiting for verification is a luxury it does not have. The lack of information becomes the trigger. The fear of being blinded and disarmed forces the commander to launch based on the last known data point, a potential threat. The digital fog compels the kinetic cost, weaponizing uncertainty itself. The strategic simultaneity conundrum, as documented in political science simulations, is no longer a theoretical model. It is an active protocol. Adversaries understand that a systemic attack on U.S. solvency, driven by its $38 trillion debt liability, cannot be a speculative first strike. It requires precise measurement. The objective is to calibrate the hegemon's breaking point. The core question is no longer how will the military respond, but at what point does the cost of kinetic overextension trigger a domestic liquidity crisis? An answer requires live data. Therefore, the forecast is not for a decapitation strike. It is for a calibration shot. According to CSIS threat modeling, we anticipate a high-probability, attribution-impossible event targeting critical economic infrastructure within the next 12 months. The vector, a cascading failure of the industrial control systems governing a primary West Coast maritime port. The event will manifest as a 72-hour logistics blackout, attributed publicly to a zero-day exploit by a non-state ransomware group. The real purpose is to measure the velocity of the supply chain paralysis and the resulting shock to the Treasury market. This is the final data point required before initiating a full-spectrum solvency crisis.